we have here is perhaps the nicest 1963 Studebaker Avanti R2 on the planet. Under the hood is a 289 cubic inch V8 complete with a Paxton supercharger. Out back is a Dana 44 rear end, and the interior is one of the nicest you will probably ever see, and we're bringing it to you right now, right here on Tested Muscle. What's the first thing that you think of when you hear Studebaker? Well, for me personally, I think of a movie that was released back in the late 70s with Kermit and Fozzie, and they were driving a 1951 bullet-nosed Commander. It was the Muppet movie, and it was my first experience to Studebaker, and for some reason it just stuck with me. Now, this Studebaker is something completely different. This is a 1963 Avanti R2. And it is probably one of the coolest, most beautifully styled kind of mid-century modern cars that you are ever going to see. The owner is a gentleman by the name of Mark Zickafoose. Mark decided, you know what, I'm gonna bring this car back to life, I'm gonna restore it, and we have the privilege of driving it right now, and it is absolutely unbelievable.
It's been in the family for a little better than 50 years. We bought it in 1972. It was under a tarp in Peoria, Illinois. And Dad we were buying a 1937 Accord at the time. And we looked under this tarp and Dad fell in love with this car. We took it home. Dad drove it a little bit. As a young man, I was doing some work on the front end and helping Dad make sure it worked well and did all that stuff. As it went along, Dad passed away in 1983. And he was a Marine. So if you know about Marines, it's all about respect. So he wasn't around to ask if I could drive the car. So it sat around for about 20 years. If I restore the car, Dad probably wouldn't mind if I drive it now and again. So I commenced to bust it all apart. Did what I could to it, you know, as good a restoration as I could muster. And then, and now I still don't drive it.
So let's talk about the specs for a second in this car. Under the hood is a 289 cubic inch Studebaker V8 with a Paxton supercharger, and it came that way from the factory. It makes 290 horsepower, 303 pound-feet of torque. Now, out back there's a Dana 44 with 373 gears, and in 1962, believe it or not, this was the fastest production car you could buy. With a top speed, are you ready? 158 miles an hour. In 1963, that's 60 years ago, this sucker was doing 158 miles an hour. When you look at the car now, the lines on the car are absolutely spectacular, right? It does not look like it's a 60-year-old piece. Now, the car does have some pretty sporting qualities to it. If you look at the exterior of the car, if you look at the design feature, well, the headlights themselves have headlight covers over them for aerodynamics. The bumper guards, right? The bumper itself, as opposed to having these big tacky kind of rubber bumper, you know, kind of add-ons, they're actually rubber strips that are embedded into the center of the bumper and at the ends. The blinkers are embedded in the front ends of the fenders, and it's very smooth, it's very clean. And even though turn signals or marker lights on the sides of vehicles weren't mandated until the late 60s, the designers on this car actually did them in the rear. So the rear turn signal wraps around the rear quarter panel so that people at night can actually see the car from the side. I mean, as a design, it's absolutely spectacular. And 60 years later, it still looks this good on the road. Now, Studebaker was like the 4th largest American car company back in the day, okay? So this car shares quite a few parts with a lot of its little neighbors.
So the rear cross member back here adds stability to the rear of the frame after the rear end. You'll notice that the thing is very solid going down the road.
Okay.
And it's the boxed frame and then the big I-beam X member there. The X member in the middle, it adds so much strength and rigidity to the car, and you can feel it very well when you're driving the car.
Yeah. that all helps to keep the body from kind of twisting and moving around. Now, when I talk about the body on this car is not steel. The body on this car is fiberglass. For a fiberglass body, it was much, much cheaper to actually produce the car. Okay, so production years for these things were 1962, 1963, but they were sold as 1963 and 1964 models because they were built in 62, sold in 63, and then again in 64. So production numbers for the Avanti, they're pretty rare, about 3,800 in total. And for the Avanti R2, the supercharged cars, about just over 1,500 or thereabouts. So what is this thing like to drive? Well, let's get into it, right? Let's talk about the interior first. I'm a big dude. I'm 6'4", on a good day, I'm 240, on a bad day, I'm 250, right? I am pretty much at max capacity in here. The seats are these crazy buckets. Now they do go back, but there is no recline. So when you're in here, you're kind of in here. Now, what's really interesting is Studebaker was pretty good about trying to kind of design safety features. So the dash is actually padded. You did have these bumpers, the body is fiberglass, but what's interesting in this car is there are no seatbelts, because that was an option, and this one didn't have it. So while the rest of the car is probably pretty safe, well, I'm probably not pretty safe, God forbid I hit something, but we're not gonna do that because Mark will kill me and the car's way too nice.
And let's not forget about the built-in roll bar. Studebaker was one of the first manufacturers to incorporate a built-in roll bar into the structure of the car, which shows you just how innovative and forward-thinking they really were.
From a driving perspective, the whole car is just so aircraft inspired, and it is absolutely to die for. First off, you have this absolutely beautiful kind of two-prong wheel, okay? The dash is very, very driver-centric. The passenger really can't see the gauges, but you have everything you need to know. You've got your clock, your water temp, amp meter, speedo, tach, fuel gauge, oil pressure, and of course you have a boost gauge for the supercharger. Now, you also have these beautiful aircraft-inspired switches on top for the headlights. Your controls down here are for your heat. There is no air conditioning in this car. Now, on a side note, if you got the regular Avanti, not the R2, the air conditioning unit would have replaced where the blower is. So you got to make up your mind. Do you want to be hot and fast, or do you want to be relatively slow and cold? I guess that depends. You could ask yourself what kind of person you are and kind of go from there. Transmissions, they came with a couple of different ones. They either came with a 3-speed manual, a 4-speed manual, or a 3-speed automatic like we have here. And all of them were made by Borg-Warner. You know, you look at this thing, and there's a lot of muscle car stuff in here. There's a lot of factory performance stuff in here. And so people will ask yourself, well, okay, the name of the show is Tested Muscle. Is this really a muscle car? And my answer to you is, yeah, it is. But think of it like this. Think of it as an executive performance car, as an executive muscle car. You have one big fat axle, nice steep gears, blown V8. Now, if you look underneath, what else are you gonna see? Factory installed traction bars that go on top of the axle and then head down. It's a very, very kind of interesting design that proved that these cars were not only capable in a straight line, but they were comfortable to drive, they were easy to drive. Oh, and one thing I forgot. Now get this. This was the first mass-produced American factory car with front disc brakes.
Disc brakes that stop 40% sooner than any other production car brake system on the market, even when soaking wet.
So the gentleman behind the creation and the design of this car was a designer by the name of Raymond Loewy, and he was really an industrial designer. The way that he thought about this car was very much like that. He wanted something sleek, he wanted something that was comfortable, he wanted something that would make a statement when people started going down the road. And there's some really cool design touches, which I absolutely love. So if you look at the hood, directly in front of me, coming from the dash lines here, there is this beautiful hood scoop that goes all the way down to the edge of the hood. And on the front is the Studebaker emblem. Now, he redesigned it, he called it the Soft S. And basically, his theory was, well, if you just look down that line, you'll always know where the car goes, and it acts as kind of a bullseye or a sight on a gun, which I thought was pretty interesting. Performance-wise, how does the car go? And I want you to keep in mind, like, it's pretty hot right now. It's probably about 90 degrees. But if we go down and we drop it into kind of first gear and literally just roll into it, like, the car actually, it accelerates really good. You know, 0 to 60 in this thing is probably, I don't know, I want to say about low to mid 7s, which is fine. Again, you're not talking about a massive amount of power, 300 or so pound-feet of torque in the low threes, 290 horsepower-ish, but it makes the car scoot along very well. What do you do if you want one of these? Where do you go? How do you look? Well, I'm going to tell you right there, and this is a shameless plug for Hemmings online marketplace because we've got like 20,000 cars on there. Start there because I guarantee we've got a bunch of these things. We also have our auction, our make offer pages, and it's great. But here's the thing, and this goes with any old car, any car that you're going to buy. Do your due diligence, okay? This car, because it's so rare, and Studebakers are so rare by themselves, you have to start going down these rabbit holes because a lot of times what will happen is you might be looking, you know, at somebody's privately owned vehicle and say, well, the car really looks great. And like on a fiberglass car, you're going to find any rust? Well, not on the top, not on the body, but underneath you very well might. So you really have to be cognizant of checking that out. So when it comes to an old car, when it comes to a collectible, when it comes to a classic, do your due diligence, do the research, and honestly, man, you find a car like this, you are golden. Look at this car and look at all the detail shots that we took of it because we tried to cover it in such a way that you can use this as a prime example of a car that you would personally want in your collection. Mark, your car is one of the best I've ever seen. Honestly, we also have to thank the Gilmore Auto Museum in Hickory Corners, Michigan, because you know, that's where this car is. This car is literally a museum piece that Mark was kind enough to say, guys, I got one, take it out, have fun with it, enjoy it. I did not build it to sit. I did not build it to, you know, collect dust. I built it to showcase, and that's exactly what we're doing. So again, look at this car, take it in, because it's one of the best I've ever seen.
Tested Muscle is presented by American Collectors Insurance.
In this wonderful hobby of ours, American Collectors Insurance doesn't believe in a one-size-fits-all policy when it comes to vehicle usage and offers mileage tiers that vary from 1,000 to 10,000 miles annually. So, head over to AmericanCollectors.com and get a policy that's right for you now.
So there you have it, the 1963 Studebaker Avanti R2. A misunderstood mid-century modern masterpiece that is filled with muscle car go-fast goodies and a style that is beyond elegant. Folks, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time on Tested Muscle.